I think it'd be more than fair to say that to many of us, 2020 feels like one giant dumpster fire. I used to use that phrase a lot. I've used it even more just talking to people what I see going on around me. One of my own personal struggles, and I think the struggle for a lot of individual Christians and church leaders, is to know how do we respond? What is our responsibility? What is God calling us to do as far as speaking into some of the difficulties that we see happening around us? So next, Mike, I'd like to ask you just to respond to a few of the challenges that we're seeing in the news and social media, just all around us. So let's start with COVID-19 and church closings. How should we be responding to those sorts of situations?
Initially, when I talked about it in my book, When the World Stops, my counsel was, remember, we got a temporary shutdown for a little while, and Trump is hoping that everything will be opened up by Easter and things like that. So my initial counsel was, one, our first posture is obey the governing authorities. And two, set a good example, love your neighbor, and don't be the ones that are known as this church is the one infecting our community or spreading things around our community. Now that we are so far into things, now that it's clear that nobody even knows what you mask or no mask, or, there's so much controversy. Now that we're having consistent overreach, especially from some Democratic mayors and governors, the hypocrisy of Nevada, where you can, if a casino, you operate a casino, you can operate that half full. If you have a church building that seats 3,000 people, you can have no more than 50. If you're a casino and you let a church group use your casino, you get fined. If you're in California, march down the streets and protest, no problem. But gather as a church, you can't sing. You can't have a home Bible study. So now that there has been such inconsistency, such overreach, abortion clinics are essential services, liquor stores are essential services, churches do not provide essential services, that I really think that many need to do everything they can to open and meet, always being respectful, not just trashing the government, but say, with all respect, we have to do what we feel is right. This is overreach. This is inconsistent. But more than that, we have to recognize that God is doing something in the midst of this, and that the whole goal is not just to pack our building out, because for the most part, that wasn't really working in terms of evangelism, discipleship, and impacting the culture around us. The key thing is being the church, even more than going to church. So in my book back then, I said, if the time comes that there's overreach, you better believe we push back against it, and already mentioned Rodney Howard-Browne and what had happened. So I'm with those pastors that feel to do that. I'm also with pastors that feel that the best thing to do is to pour into home groups and to think about church differently. In other words, to look at this crisis and to say, what can we do to take the gospel outside of our church buildings? But above all, every leader needs to hear for himself or herself. They can't be influenced by fear. They can't be influenced by what the government's doing. They have to get God's word and God's plan for their own flock.